On the margins of a forgotten desert, and under the stern gaze of the elders, Abner was born son of Ner, of the tribe of Benjamin, amidst oral traditions and tales of bravery that circulated among the warriors' camps. Growing up among the accounts of the judges and the shadow of the enemies that lurked around the promised lands, young Abner learned from a tender age that a man's true strength was not measured solely by the vigor of his muscles, but by the sharpness of his strategic thinking and the loyalty that pulsed in his heart. From his earliest years, he accompanied the rituals of the armies preparing to face constant threats. It was common to see him observing, with an attentive and silent gaze, the men training with spears and shields, while the veterans, wounded and marked by battles, shared their experiences in the shade of ancient oaks. Every feature of the soldiers' faces, every murmur of hope or despair etched in Abner the conviction that war, though relentless, was also a seed of learning and personal transformation. Unbeknownst to him, his blood already carried the promise of grand deeds. His lineage, intertwined with familial ties to those who would one day become the first monarchs of Israel, reflected the inheritance of an unusual destiny. As the winds howled through the desert and the stories of the ancestors echoed in the starry nights, Abner found himself immersed in the daily life of the warriors, gaining a profound insight into the art of war that blended planning with courage. With each dawn, the sun bathed the plains and the determined faces of the combatants, while he, still young, absorbed as one drinks from the fountain of wisdom the teachings that arose from the mistakes and successes of those who had fought before him. It was not long before divine intervention announced itself through the voice of a man in simple garments and a deep gaze. Samuel, the prophet revered for his speeches that sparkled with the fury of thunder, arrived in the land of Benjamin and proclaimed, with words cloaked in celestial authority, that a king had been chosen by God to unify the scattered fragments of the people of Israel. Although the message was not directed at young Abner, it heralded the transformation of the political landscape of that time. The chorus of destiny intoned that Saul, imposing and of striking stature, would be the king who would raise the homeland. Thus, while the inhabitants of the cities murmured about the arrival of a new era, Abner saw his path inevitably intertwine with the rise of that sovereign of powerful features. As Saul ascended to the throne, the metamorphosis in Abner's life became visible and almost palpable. No longer the boy who absorbed every lesson from daily life, he was now graced with the responsibility of commanding the royal armies. Acting as the executing arm of the king, his presence on the battlefields was synonymous with strategy and unwavering strength. With his sharp mind, Abner planned each assault with a freshness that blended shrewdness and experience, and invariably transformed the war scene into a game where reasoning was as lethal as the blade wielded. His name quickly gained a significance that transcended the borders of his tribe, and both allies and enemies began to recognize in him the reflection of the ideal warrior. In the sandy plains where the Philistines presented themselves as the constant threat, Abner was the beacon that guided Saul's men to victory. The clamor of the combatants mingled with the thunderous sounds of weapons, and the smell of earth and blood announced the sacrifice demanded in each clash. But unlike many who surrendered frantically to brute force, Abner understood that battle was not merely about fierce confrontations. It was also a lesson in calculation and intellectual power. Every order given had the precision of a divine decree, and every advance of his men echoed the certainty of a possible future, even if uncertain. However, fate wove unexpected plots when, in one of those moments when the palace streets filled with rumors and intrigues, a new character emerged silently among the camps. David, a young shepherd who, with simplicity and audacity, had already gained fame for defeating a feared giant, entered the journey of war. Unlike his peers, David was not clad in imposing garments or the rigidity of a military tradition. His star shone with its own light, a brightness that sparked admiration and, at the same time, stirred jealousy. For Abner, who always discerned the hidden value in the souls of those who stood out for their spirit, David's eyes told a story of inner strength, unwavering faith, and a potential that went beyond the limits of combat technique. The episode, marking David's rise, the confrontation with Goliath, became emblematic. Without the conventions of arms, armed only with a sling and 5 carefully chosen stones, David challenged the collective tension that weighed upon the army. In that moment, as the crowd held its breath, the the young man showed that true power resided in the union of courage and conviction. Abner, witnessing this feat with an uneasy heart, felt that something was changing irreversibly in the course of his own story and in that of the kingdom. The aura of the palace, once imbued with discipline and mutual respect, began to be invaded by a faint and treacherous shadow. The attention that David attracted, fueled by the songs and murmurs of the citizens, awakened in Saul feelings of unease and jealousy. The king, who once firmly ruled the affairs of state, began to be tormented by sleepless nights, where the image of the young hero appeared in every corner and trembled in the memory of his authority. Abner, immersed in the whirlwind of conflicting loyalties, saw his fidelity put to the test. The duality between the duty to serve the king and the recognition of what was just and true became increasingly complex. On a night when the atmosphere seemed charged with omens difficult to decipher, the environment inside the palace took on dramatic contours. In the dim light of a chamber, emotions flared and the air grew dense. Driven by an impulse that seemed more like the fruit of momentary insanity, Saul hurled his spear at David in an abrupt act of violence that surprised everyone. By a nearly miraculous feat, the young man dodged at the exact moment, avoiding the blow that could have been fatal. The silence that followed was profound, as if time had stopped to process the irreversible change that was approaching. The assassination attempt, occurring right there in the depths of the night, opened the doors to a new chapter in the troubled history of the kingdom. David, compelled to leave the camp to escape the clutches of uncontrolled fury, set off toward the unknown. This forced exile was not merely a physical escape, but the harbinger of a social and political transformation that would alter the balance of power. Abner, while leading the armies in relentless searches, felt the weight of being the faithful executor of orders that sometimes protected the nation against external enemies, sometimes perpetuated conflicts that originated within the palace itself. Amid the unfolding of this plot, tension grew in the corridors and camps. While the warriors patrolled the borders in anticipation of new clashes with the Philistines, internal unrest turned every decision into a moral dilemma. The echo of David's footsteps, even from a distance, spread like a whisper that threatened to shake the foundations of a reign already weakened by fear and uncertainty. Abner, now established as a strategist and feared leader, found himself at a crossroads. To maintain his blind loyalty to a king dominated by enmity, or to reinvent his path, proposing an alliance that could restore the unity of the Israelites. The scenario took on dramatic contours on the battlefield, marked by an episode that would echo through generations. Amid preparations to face the troops of enemies that were gathering mercilessly, Abner determined that a small group of warriors would represent his armies in a ritual duel, intending to preserve honor and avoid excessive bloodshed. About 12 combatants from each side advanced into an improvised arena, where destiny seemed to hang over blades and courage. The clash, which was supposed to symbolize a contest of honor, quickly degenerated into a violent and unrestrained confrontation. Amid the chaos, a young warrior of notable skill, Azael, brother of an equally fierce commander, stood out. Undeterred by the tacit rules of honor, Azael charged fiercely at Abner in a deeply personal attempt to avenge old wounds that somehow overflowed from the battlefield into the souls of the combatants. The clash of their weapons was as striking as the awakening of an inevitable tragedy. Abner, who had faced countless opponents and knew well the dangers of impetuosity, wielded his spear with surgical precision. The blade, in a swift and inexorable motion, pierced Azael's abdomen, who fell to the ground, silenced forever. The impact of that death resonated throughout the field, momentarily interrupting the clash and making it clear that this battle meant much more than a simple attempt to save honor. It was the spark for a conflict that would extend throughout the kingdom. The blood shed that day marked the beginning of an intense reordering of forces and alliances. Joab, the commander leading David's soldiers, harbored a deep resentment for what had occurred and saw in Azael's death a portent of personal vengeance. Even as bodies fell and cries of pain mingled with the hot afternoon wind, the atmosphere became charged with the foreboding that old ties would be violently severed and that peace would never be restored so easily. After that bloody episode, Abner, aware that the strategic advantage was dissipating, ordered the withdrawal of his troops. His men scattered across the deserts, as if trying to hide the trace of the scars left on that battlefield. While Joab shouted words of fury and promised relentless retaliation, the commander, who had always been synonymous with loyalty and strategy, found himself confronted with the bitter reality that the lines between duty and survival were becoming dangerously thin. It was not long before instability spread through the throne. Gradually, the court was taken over by suspicions and intrigues. Ishbosheth, the young man designated to inherit the crown of the northern tribes, proved incapable of assuming the necessary posture to lead a people so marked by warrior tradition and daily challenges. The fragility of his character and his hesitation to make firm decisions raised doubts about the continuity of Saul's lineage. It was then that Abner, carrying in his chest the weight of years dedicated to protecting a legacy and the conviction that a divided Israel could not survive, made a radical decision. Convinced that only true unity, grounded in robust leadership, could rescue the nation's destiny, the commander decided to approach David. Recognizing that the young shepherd, now consecrated by his victories and the unwavering faith of his followers, possessed the strength necessary to lead the people toward a new era, Abner chose to set aside old loyalties and proclaim a bold alliance. In a gesture of profound renunciation of the conventions that had marked him so deeply, he offered David the dominion over all the kingdom of Israel, a proposal that carried within it the hope that the tribulations would conclude their cycle and give way to an era of reconciliation. Moved both by the fatigue of continuous struggles and by the open wound of constant division, Abner saw in the unity of Israel not only a political strategy, but a moral imperative. He believed that the bloodshed in battles would finally need to give way to the comfort of a peace built on the recognition of human dignity and the sacrifice of the soldiers who, in every conflict, wrote their story with sweat and tears. However, in a world where personal desires and ambitions blurred with the quest for order, the path to reconciliation was far from peaceful. As he set off toward the city of Hebron, where David awaited the designs of the new era, Abner carried with him the longing to see a united people and the weight of the countless sacrifices that had been demanded of him. But fate, capricious and relentless, still reserved for him one last trial. Among the cautious shadows of the palace corridors, a figure driven by grudges and memories of carnage lurked. Joab, intensely marked by the loss of his brother Azael and the burning desire for revenge, saw in the alliance between Abner and David a personal affront, an act of betrayal that could never be forgiven. With the cunning of one who had already navigated the corners of intrigue and the coldness of a harsh winter, he devised a silent plan to end the trajectory he considered an unforgivable mistake. Feigning urgency and presenting himself as a faithful messenger of the throne, Joab persuaded Abner to return to the gates of Hebron to address matters that, according to him, required immediate attention. Unaware of the imminent trap, the commander, confident in the nobility of his intentions and in the conviction of the alliance sealed with David, entered the recesses of the palace. The atmosphere, already permeated by secrets and suspicious glances, transformed into a scene of inevitable betrayal. In a dimly lit recess, where words were silenced by the blade of destiny, Joab executed his decision. In a gesture that left no room for debate or regret, he plunged the dagger into the back of the faithful commander. The blow came swiftly, without ceremony, and the brightness of Abner, once so bright in the flames of hope, tilted toward the end. The sacrifice of that man, who had been the pillar in wars and the architect of strategies throughout his life, abruptly sealed the fate of an alliance that could have united the tribes of Israel. The news soon spread like an uncontrollable fire. King David, upon learning of the betrayal, was overcome with immense sorrow. Amid tears and lamentations, he recognized that Abner's death was not the result of a simplistic rivalry, but the product of an internal struggle that corrupted the very spirit of a wounded nation. David, with a face marked by pain, ordered that Abner's coffin be raised with the honors of a warrior, and that his name never be forgotten by those who fought not only against enemies, but against the very ingratitude of power. The funeral, held in a solemnity that mixed respect, sorrow, and the shadow of an uncertain future, gathered men and women who, even amid the scars of battles, faced the horizon with the faint hope of better days. In every word spoken, in every silent tear, there was the acknowledgement of the fact that Abner, with all his dilemmas and choices, had been a man shaped by the harshness of existence and the inconstancy of destinies. Amid the tumult of the times, the echoes of Abner's journey persevered as a profound message. While some saw in him merely a commander of armies, others recognized the man who, even divided between duty and the desire for justice, had wagered all his strength on the hope of a united Israel. The lessons his life left were as numerous as the marks left on the battlefields. Loyalty, however admired, carries the risk of being misinterpreted, and the relentless pursuit of power can ultimately erode the bonds that should unite a people. The silence that followed the tumult of events, when the cries had already merged with the whispers of the wind that surrounded the ancient stones, there was an invitation to introspection for all those who heard Abner's story. In every decision made, there was the reflection of a broader reality, that the paths of existence are uncertain, and that the bridge between combat and peace requires a courage that goes beyond skill with a spear. This courage lies in realizing that sometimes the grandest victory is knowing when to retreat and build, with the rubble of old disputes, a new hope. In today's world, even though the battlefields have transformed, Abner's narrative continues to resonate. It reminds us that in the whirlwind of power and the desire to maintain control, the dignity of the human being is often lost. That the thirst for revenge, when fueled by old wounds, perpetuates the cycle of violence and hinders the forging of true bonds of solidarity. The story of that commander transcends his time, challenging us to understand that true triumph is not found in the accumulation of military glories or in victories obtained at the cost of countless sacrifices, but in the ability to transform suffering into a lesson that illuminates the path to reconciliation. Thus, at the end of a journey marked by difficult choices and dramatic turns, Abner's legacy remains a beacon for those who seek to walk with the wisdom of those who have suffered and learned from their mistakes. He is proof that, even in the face of the cruelest betrayals and challenges that seem insurmountable, the human spirit can seek, in fragility and imperfection, the foundation to build a future where hope prevails over hatred. May each reader, upon encountering this narrative, find in it an invitation to reflect on their own dilemmas, on the importance of choosing unity amid disunity, compassion amid the thirst for revenge, and the invaluable worth of human dignity. For in the complex tapestry of our existences, each choice, each sacrifice, and each gesture of loyalty draws the lines of destiny, and it is up to us, with courage and humility, to write an ending that transcends pain and embraces hope. And so on the hills where once Abner's footsteps resonated with strength and virtue, remains the legacy of a man who dared to challenge the fates laid out before him. His life, filled with epic battles, unwavering choices, and moments of introspection, serves as an eternal call for us to find the discernment to build bridges instead of walls, even in the darkest moments. Today, as the voices recounting the deeds of the ancients blend with the corners of collective memory, the spirit of Abner rises, inviting each of us to recognize that true victory lies in knowing that, even when the heart is torn by conflict, there remains the chance to rebuild a path of peace and justice for all. May the story of this warrior, who traversed the barren path of war and, in a final act of boldness, sought reconciliation even under the weight of betrayal, inspire future generations to transcend the barriers of pride and discord. May it be remembered not only as a record of past struggles, but as an eternal reminder that, even if the blade cuts and alliances dissolve, it is up to us, with courage and wisdom, to seek to make it light at the end of the tunnel. In every dawn, when the sky is tinged with colors that announce the possibility of a new day, may we remember the epic of Abner and understand that, at the intersection of violence and peace, between duty and desire, lies the opportunity to rewrite history, with hands that, even wounded, still know how to offer the gift of hope. And thus, in a world that constantly reinvents itself, Abner's legacy endures as an epic that teaches that the true greatness of a man is not measured only by his victories on the battlefields, but also by his ability to transform pain into learning and betrayal into an eternal invitation to redemption. If you were moved and reflected on this epic journey, subscribe now, leave your like, and share with friends who also seek inspiration in the great stories of faith and overcoming. Your participation encourages us to continue bringing new narratives that unite the past, present, and the hope for a better future. Thank you very much, and see you in the next video.